Prepathon. Before I move on to tell you more about what this session is about, I have a few quick announcements to make. First is that we have the event survey live on the chat. So if you can see, there is a button that says go to survey. Make sure that you click it, leave your feedback, and let us know how we did. Obviously, we would want to know that because we want to improve the event experience for all of you. Because this is obviously a recurring event, an annual thing that we do every year. We want to do it in a better way for you folks. So make sure that you leave your feedback over there as well, and make sure that it has a bit of detail so that we can understand what specific things that we need to improve on. Secondly, I want to re-announce that we have the Cloudways Awards live. You can check those out in the pinned section, in the pinned comment on in the chat, so you can start submitting your entries. And finally, I will be announcing the winners for all the giveaways after this session. So make sure that you stick around till the end of this session so you can find out who is the winner, and you might be the lucky one as well. Moving on to this session, I have a very special guest with me today who is going to be discussing a very, very special topic. So, the theme of the event was all about how we can future proof our online stores for the next generation of buyers. And Grant McAngus, the founder of Bad Brain Media, is going to be doing exactly that. He's going to be teaching us about Gen Z buying habits and how to sell to a generation that doesn't like spending. Grant, how are you? How are you doing? And it's so lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thanks, Moise. I'm really excited to be here. It seems like you've had 3 days of amazing sessions. I'm very grateful to be one of those and to be the last one, no less.
Yeah, so I will give you the floor, Grant, without any further ado. You have the floor. You can carry on with your presentation.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And thanks, DigitalOcean, for arranging this. And thanks for everyone tuning in to watch. I'm really excited to take you through the session that I've put together on the topic that you can see on screen, Gen Z buying habits, and how to sell to this generation that maybe do or don't like spending. That's something that we'll go into. See the survey? Sorry, guys. Is everything coming through okay? Just give me a yep so I can carry on. Guys, everything okay? Can you see my screen? Not hearing anything on my side. Just give me a thumbs up. Oh, cool. Okay. Seeing some thumbs. I'm going to carry on. I love a technical hitch. Okay, cool. So who am I before we go into it? My name's Grant. As you've known, I'm the founder of Bad Brain. We are a consultancy specialized for the creator economy. So among a few different things that we do, one of the main things is helping sort of small to medium businesses, startups, scale ups establish what their creator program looks like, what their influencer program looks like. And by the same token, helping established brands, global brands, maybe kind of optimize their existing mature creative programs. We found that as the market and the industry has matured, some of the first movers to adopt creators have found themselves in a place where their work streams are tangled. There's lots of different departments doing lots of different things. We help to optimize that. So based on that, based on what you know now about Bad Brain, you probably have an idea of where I'm going to steer this ship in terms of Gen Z buying habits. But let's kick it off and see where we get to. I think first and foremost, it's really important if we're going to talk about generations or age ranges to kind of define who exactly we're talking about. It is one of the, generations are one of those things that we have a broad understanding of. People kind of roughly understand what we're talking about when we say millennial or boomer or Gen X, but there are nuances to kind of the exact classifications depending on what school of thought you subscribe to. For this, for purposes of this, we're using the Pew Research Institute. in terms of what they define as Gen Z, Gen Alpha. And we're saying that Gen Z are anyone born between the years of 1997 and 2012. So that would make the youngest among Gen Z 13 today, or the oldest 28. By the same token, while there's actually a little bit of debate on when Gen Alpha started, but broadly speaking, we're classifying Gen Alpha as anyone born between 2010 and 2024. So kind of hot on the heels of Gen Z, Gen Alpha are very soon about to start making their strides into the working world and into becoming consumers themselves. So the kind of topic at hand, are Gen Z spending less? This was something that I thought was, to my mind, kind of clashed with what I understood about Gen Z, because the last I'd heard, this generation, Generation Z, were the kind of largest portion of our global population, which is in fact true. So Gen Z make up 24.6% of the entire global population. So by that token, you would think that their spending power would equate to that and would maybe even outsize other generations. But according to studies, that is not quite the case. Gen Z's spending power sits at roughly 17%, which is smaller compared to their size when you look at the likes of the millennial age group, who are 22% of the global population, 22% of our spending power, and Gen X, who actually occupy a smaller percentage of population, but the largest overall percentage of spending power. So why could that be? Well, the easy answer, I suppose we could all come back to, is the economy, right? When GWI ran a survey this time last year, respondents to that survey, with the question being kind of like, how do they see themselves spending over the next 12 months? A third of those respondents said that they were in fact going to be spending less, like actively spending less money. And when they asked the reason why, cost of living and the inflation of essential goods was listed right up there as the top of the list. So there's obviously some macroeconomics at play as to why Gen Z may be spending a little bit less than some of their older counterparts. There could also be, and this one is maybe one up for debate, that Gen Z may just be better at saving their money, i.e. not spending, actively putting their money away. According to another GWI study, looking at 18 to 27-year-olds in 2017, and then looking at 18 to 2017-year-olds in 2024, revealed a stark difference in how much people were investing money in different kind of institutions, whether that be in gold or in stocks and shares, bonds, or investment funds. Now, to me, while I think this does say that there's some better financial literacy among a younger generation, it's probably also fair to say that in that kind of 7-year period, we've really seen a huge rise in digital banking, right? In challenger banks, in your Revoluts, your Robinhoods, and etc. So, and anyone that's used those apps will know that actually it's pretty easy to kind of chuck money into these different pots quite easily at very small and high scales. So there's probably something to be said for the idea that Gen Z are saving more, and maybe that's why they're not spending. But I don't think that's it. I think if you want to ask me, my personal opinion, it's because this is still a very young generation. I think, but just because us as a society and as marketers and as business leaders we've gotten so acutely aware of this idea of generation labeling, we've maybe got a little bit over our skis in terms of the fact that just because Gen Z have now come of age, that they should be spending like every other generation. Going back to that first slide, right? Remember, the youngest in the Gen Z cohort are still 13. They're still not really in the working world. They don't command their own income. The eldest among Gen Z are 28. So while they are in the working world, they aren't necessarily by comparison at the kind of peak of their potential earning career where they'll have the most disposable income. So I think, there's maybe a little bit of hot air over the idea that Gen Z aren't spending as much as their population should be. But if you are sat there at the end of this kind of presentation thinking, about your brand and about your company and looking at your customer base and saying, our product should be doing better among this generation than it is, then it is something that's worth going deeper on. And I think if it isn't, economics, if it isn't truly spending decisions, I actually think the alternative is that it's the way that we as brands interact with this generation. And I think, there's one big thing that's happened over the last 20 years, and that is the complete upending of our media ecosystem. So the next few slides are going to be hitting some very obvious, nails on the head. So just bear with me. I'm going to make a point. I know that the next few slides are going to be like, yeah, tell me something I don't know, Grant, but just bear with it. If we look at the last 20 years of media consumption, right, that basically the whole lifespan of the Gen Z kind of cohort, there was a study by Ofcom in the UK who basically measured what the kind of media diet was like for people back in 2005 in the UK. And sure enough, 3.5 hours a day was the average amount of time that people spent in front of the TV, and TV was the kind of predominant kind of media kind of delivery system in the home. Mobile existed, right? But we were just playing Snake on it, or texting and calling. Maybe I was just playing Snake on it. So in the last 20 years, obviously that's completely changed. We now have more of our time spent on mobile as a pure media consumption device, and TV is somewhat shrunk. We all know on this call that blue circle hides many different nuances of what the new TV ecosystem looks like. It's not just broadcast linear TV anymore. It's streaming, it's ad-supported TV, it's connected TV. We also know there's going to be an overlap, right? That we know that the time that you spend on mobile is not always the only focus of your attention. It's likely that the TV is on in the background. So just in those 20 years, in terms of how we get information, how we consume media, it's completely changed. Some other stats that kind of back that up that I think are interesting, that in 2023, less than half of 16 to 24-year-olds watched broadcast TV within the space of a week. So basically, over half of that age range didn't tune into live TV within a given week, which, again, going back 20 years, would be mad to think of. In the UK, in terms of like share of viewing, YouTube has become the number 2 video service behind the BBC, which is really, really pretty significant. And I know that there's been talk of kind of studios and networks and broadcasters having all of their focus on Netflix and the streamers. They kind of taken their eye off the ball when it comes to YouTube, and it's now become such a big part of the ecosystem. So these are all of the obvious things, right? The way that we get media, and by association advertising, has completely changed. Let's go a little bit of a step further and look at what that media diet comprises of across generations. This is a study from Deloitte, and again, it's going to show you things that you'll probably be aware of. The oldest among our population spend the kind of least amount of time with media, and the most amount of time of that time they spend with traditional broadcast live TV. And Gen Z, of course, their media diet is typically nearly 7 hours a day, and it's comprised more so than any other generation before them of playing video games, listening to podcasts, consuming social media, watching UGC content, which this study kind of categorizes as YouTube content. So, no big surprises there, right? No revelations. But the one thing that I kind of take away from this, and the one thing that's not immediate obvious, is what do all of these platforms on the left-hand side have in common? Almost all of them. In fact, maybe all of them. To me, it is creators have become part of all of those platforms. You might think of podcasts as being, podcasters, but ultimately people that started in podcasts, because of the migration to video and YouTube, have become creators in their own right. Creators have launched their own podcasts. Video games, it was really easy on the surface to think of that as a solitary activity, but instead it's become a place for people to connect online. It's become a place where people watch great gamers play, who then in turn become creators. You've obviously got UGC, you've got social media, and even you've got the likes of Amazon Prime and the streamers starting to bring YouTube creators like Mr. Beast over into their world. So you're seeing the creator landscape really start to touch all of these different points of media. The point I'm making is that when we're thinking about Gen Z, keep in mind that their media diet is pretty vast, it's pretty varied, it's very digital, and it's very creator first. But the interesting part about that is that if you ask Gen Z, why do they go to social media, for instance, very few respondents in this survey that we're showing here would actually cite specifically following creators as the reason that they go to these platforms. They say that they're there to find funny posts, look at memes, find out what's going on in the world, see what's trending and being talked about, without any kind of paying mind to the fact that the sources of all of those things that they're seeking are coming from creators. Creators are the absolute wallpaper of these platforms. You know, funny story, anecdotally, last year, my partner, she's a teacher, she invited me to the school's career day. And naively, I went along thinking that as someone that works in social media and works with influencers, that, you know, I might be able to get in the good graces of these guys, that they might actually be interested in what I have to say. And I was completely wrong, right? I think teenagers are a tough crowd, no matter what you're saying, but they were really not interested. And when I was speaking to them and saying, hey, you know, I know you use social media, what influencers do you follow? What creators do you follow? They scoffed at the idea of them following creators or influencers. And to me, that says that they just, to them, creators are just part of the wallpaper. It's not something that you would categorize. It's so intrinsic to the content that they consume that they don't even think of it in the terms of influencer. And that, I think, is one of the reasons that I'm very, very resistant to the idea that younger generations are pulling away from advertising, or that advertising wouldn't work with this younger generation that's coming up. Because all of the content they consume is in some way related to the creator economy, and the creator economy is just another word for the advertising economy. The difference is it's how these ads, how these sponsorships are communicated with this younger audience. It is the big difference of like whether or not they're going to respond to you. But I'm getting off track. If we go back a little bit to our kind of like media diet, our landscape, not only do I think that something that all of these platforms have in common are the creators, I think another part is that these platforms are no longer purely passive. Almost all of these channels on the left hand side here actually offer, and in some respects live and die by some form of participation, where they're getting something from the user. You know, podcasts, like I said, they've migrated over to video, where there's a comment section. Video games, we know that young people, like Fortnite is considered a third place for young people, because they will go there not just to play the game, but to actually chat with their mates and hang out. Of course, user generated content, social media is a place that there's participation, but it goes beyond just speaking to people in DMs or comments. The content itself is there to be remixed, to be kind of taken apart, to be reused in a different way. Grab the sound here, I'm going to stitch this piece of content there, I'm going to sync up with this part. And so thinking again in terms of Gen Z, like every piece of content that they consume is in some way, shape or form kind of coming from a creator, i.e. someone that they don't know personally, but isn't backed by a big media conglomerate behind them, and has some form of feedback that they're able to give and receive in kind. And so when I think about brands saying that they're not resonating with Gen Z, this is the big kind of insight from my point of view, is that in order to communicate and be heard by Gen Z, you need to come to these platforms ready to speak their language. You know, the feed is a playing field. That's kind of like the insight that I would take and run with from this. Like, this is no longer a kind of world in which you can just broadcast the message and expect to get nothing back, and expect it to be heard by everyone, specifically by this younger generation. And it's only going to get more so with Gen Alpha. I want to hit you with a few examples and then give you some practical guidance on how you could incorporate this. If anyone has been on social media in the last 6 months, you probably, depending on geographically where you're from, but I know it's been quite far and wide, you probably have been exposed in some way, shape or form to Jet2 Holidays. For those of you who don't know, they're a budget airline in the UK. And if you've ever flown with them, from the moment you sit in your seat to the moment you leave and go down the corridor into the airport at the other side, you're bombarded by their advert, which is it's Jess Glynn, who's like a dance pop singer over here, her song with an ad read over the top telling you about your family holidays and how you can save more money. And it's so incessant, it's so continuous, that people started to create videos on TikTok using the sound, and kind of created like a comedic, funny or ironic kind of spin on that, by applying video content of people basically, either misbehaving on holiday or having funny fails. And by the kind of juxtaposition of the optimistic ad read and song blended with, people just doing funny stuff, it just took off. And so everyone was doing this by building on this trend. So taking the song and putting videos of fails on top of it. And, it's basically took over all of social media in the UK. If you were in the room with people playing TikTok on loud, you would hear the Jess Glynn song kind of pop off every now and again, because it was that permeating the feed that much. It became like, it got to a point of national awareness. The video that you're seeing here is someone going up to people in the street, singing the initial ad, the song, and then having people basically off the top of the dome recite the ad read back to them. So not even sing the song back to them, they would actually say that Jet2 Holidays ad read. This would then find its way into the real life, where you'd even find the lady who delivered the original ad read speaking at events and kind of doing the ad read in live time for people to enjoy. Jess Glynn would be on stage singing the song, and people would be in the audience holding up the Jet2 Holidays ad read. And we even found that despite Jet2 not having a presence outside of the UK, as far as I know, or at least not in America, that actually the trend made its way all over to the other side of the Atlantic, with people from the US joining in on the fun as well, and also kind of taking it in various different directions before finally Jet2 themselves have adopted it as part of their strategy. Now, this is like a specific example. It's quite large scale. And it's not to say, what I'm not saying here is that brands need to start replicating, just like spin up a global sensation off the, overnight. What I am saying, though, is that this is a prime example of how there's this kind of dialogue in media now, and the expectation that audiences should be able to play a part in that story is quite entrenched, and more so with younger audiences. Nearly 1.5 million videos were created of the Jet2 Holidays song. So, it's crazy how much people kind of adopted it and ran with it. Let's look at how you can participate maybe in a slightly scaled back way. The comment section, arguably now becoming one of the main reasons to go to something like TikTok or Instagram. Sometimes the comments are even better than the content. I follow an agency called OK Cool, who recently did this amazing study on comments. And as part of their survey, their actually respondents said that 29% of users regularly comment, but over 90% of people are here for the comments. They're there to read and enjoy the commentary, and will spend more time flicking through comments and laughing at the witticisms of random strangers. And you'll even have creators leaning into this. You'll see examples here on the screen where basically they've posted some content and they're saying, make the comment section look like X, Y, and Z. So it's become, again, this kind of two-way street of communication. And I love this quote. They said that, the comment section is the audience's revenge for being underestimated by brands for years before. And I think that's so true. Before maybe the advent of TikTok, social media in particular was kind of just like very one way. It was very, much like, consume this, we don't want to take your input. And now it's basically been proven that the general public are probably funnier than most marketers think they are. And so leaning into it is the best way to move forward. I'd really encourage you to check out and seek out this OK Cool study. It's called Let Them Eat Law. There's this great graph here where they talk about unintended platforms versus intended platforms and the kind of intersection of those two things. But let's talk, specifically about how we can kind of harness all of this. The idea, the concept here is that media is participatory, that the feed is a playing field. These are examples of that idea, but I'm not saying that you should go and replicate them. I'm not saying that we now all overnight need to become like witty commenters in the feeds of every single, piece of content that you see, or that you need to spin up a viral, Jet2 Holidays campaign overnight, or you need to become the Duolingo owl. There are more kind of small scale ways of adopting this kind of new language of social. And I'll take you through a couple of my favorite, some practical applications. I want to go through an example of a creator that I love called Veronica Sloacowska. Anyone that is maybe into comedy might be aware of her now, because I think she's just been announced as one of the latest members of the Saturday Night Live cast. Her brand of TikTok comedy, which got her to that position, is very, very esoteric. It's very specific. It's like a blend of The Office meets It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia with some musical theatre thrown in there and just chronically online Gen Z kind of brain rot. Um, I won't explain any of the jokes, and that's almost one of the jokes. Her comment section is filled with people saying, I have no one to share this with because it's so specific and no one's going to get it. And yet the irony is every one of those comments has about 5,000 likes of people thinking the same thing. Not only does she have a very specific style and comedic tone, there is lore behind her channel. There is a story, there's a backstory, and there's nothing audiences love these days more than some lore. The conceit with Veronica's page is that she's kind of the central character. Kyle is like the straight man, the one that kind of like plays straight to her weirdness, and then there's Michael, the cameraman. And throughout all of the comments, there's always this kind of back and forth with the audience of like, is there something between Veronica and Kyle, or is there not? People consistently comment on that. My favorite piece of branded content that I recently saw, I think this was, to be fair, this was last year, but it stayed with me, was Veronica's partnership with H&M. The way that they've done this is so kind of Gen Z forward. It's so, the feed is a playing field. It's perfect. The video is effectively Veronica kind of showing off a new outfit she has from H&M and pretending like she's got a date, which she then cancels so Kyle might ask her out. So immediately the video is playing into what the audience love about her feed, which is this element of lore. It's also incredibly funny, but it also features the outfit pretty front and center. She mentions H&M by name, but it's really her having free reign. You look in the comment section, not only are people kind of like shouting out the fact that her and Kyle are finally going out on a date, there's so many comments of people saying, this is the first ad that I've watched all the way through. I'm coming back to watch this ad. Like, the person from H&M needs a raise. And all H&M did in this situation is just find the right creator and let them run with it and have the confidence to let them run. So when I'm talking about having this participatory approach to social media, it doesn't always mean you being the one to kind of like drive that. It just means finding the right partners and kind of showing like, the culture. I have this phrase that I like to use, which is like, participate before you create. You don't need to be doing all of the like starting a TikTok dance or starting a craze. Like, just absorb what is going on in TikTok, what your audiences are responding to, and find the right partners to lean into. There's some great examples of that. I know we're kind of coming up on time, so I'm not going to linger, but some great examples recently of brands that have done this in many different ways. Severance, this is a branded ad where they actually took a user's song where they're singing along to the theme tune of Severance, and then they got the cast to basically sing along with it. So again, using some user-generated content and building upon that. Amazon ads from last year where Adam Driver is reading reviews in a very earnest tone of voice. This is very high-level ad stuff, right? But there's still an element where it feels connected to the culture and what people are saying. One of my like most inventive ones is Loewe, who's a luxury fashion house. Someone tweeted that a tomato they had looked like one of the designs that Loewe would typically come out with. And what did they do? They brought out a whole tomato-based range of products. Sorry for the trigger. I should have trigger warned on this one because it's a bit abrupt. But one of my favorite creators has this whole bit where he's a sleep paralysis demon. He partnered up with CeraVe, and the skit is hilarious and is so clearly an ad at the same time. It's brilliant. And big shout out to Bus Auntie in the UK as well, who has become a phenomenon by videoing herself in like precarious positions as a bus comes past. It's the whole thing. We don't have time to get into it. But again, that is an example of this kind of culture that brands are tapping into. Now, the thing that I would think about if I was kind of in the audience listening to this is like, that's great. This is all great brand building stuff, but where's the commerce? Where's the commercial element? That's where the 70-30 rule comes in. Of course, the examples that I've spoken about are very, very much aligned to leaning into culture, building that top of funnel, building that brand. They aren't necessarily closing sales. So how would you construct a campaign that does both? Well, the answer to that is that you don't create one piece of content and expect it to do all things. The 70-30 rule is where you would construct your campaign around having a small amount of content from your creators that are tapped into culture and that you're going to give free reign to, and that are going to build your brand and show Gen Z and audiences that you know their culture and that you know what's up. That's going to be 30% of your content. It's probably going to be 70% of your budget, because these creators will come at a high cost, and that is the way that it should be. But you should be making astute decisions on who you work with, and that's something that obviously, hopefully, your brand team or your agency partners can support you with. But it is about giving them free reign. Now, where does the commerce come from? To me, the best way to activate commerce underneath that element of kind of brand building is with UGC, it's with gifting, and it's with nano, micro, and mid-tier creators. This is where 70% of your content is going to come from, but at 30% of the cost, because you're tapping into economies of scale by working with low-reaching creators that can do this on a smaller budget. The final kind of piece of the puzzle is adding an accelerator. What I would call an accelerator is either adding an affiliate commission for creators, so they're incentivized to keep driving people to click the link and to check out, or to boost that content with paid media. Now, there's so many different things we can go on, and I'm just conscious that I've really rattled through so much in that time. I thought I was going to have more, but I like to yap. So let's wrap things up with some takeaways, and then I'll happily take some questions if there's time, or feel free to reach out to me afterwards. But my takeaways from this, if you could take anything away, would be that Gen Z is still a growing consumer base. I don't think we can say that they've fully formed into what they're going to be in terms of their spending power. But the thing to keep in mind is that their behaviors are set. They're they're going to grow to be a much more influential, holder of budget strings in years to come. But the behaviors they have now in terms of their content consumption are pretty much set. And Gen Alpha is just behind them, right? Who are going to be further down the track in terms of participation and content. The other thing I would say is that Gen Z are not passive consumers. There's an expectation that content comes with a two-way communication. The feed is a playing field. And if you want to work with them, you need to show that you understand it, and you need to prove it. So participate before you create. And finally, don't forget the 70-30 rule. Don't expect this one piece of content that you've done that really taps into Gen Z culture to be driving tons and tons of sales. You need to construct a campaign that does both for you. That's how you combine culture and commerce and ultimately reach Gen Z. Guys, thanks so much for listening. I feel like that was a lot. I just really appreciate you taking the time. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to ask them. But also feel free to reach out with the email as well.
This was amazing, Grant. I mean, clearly one of the most interesting sessions that we've had in this Prepathon, and we are rightly sort of saved it for the last. So thank you so much, Grant, for that insightful and interesting presentation. We do have a few questions that I wanted to take on stage. First one is, let me pin it on screen first. It says, what underused channel or format is quietly working for Gen Z right now?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that, underused channels would probably be channels like Snapchat. That might sound like an obvious one to some people, but Snapchat has this really unique position in the kind of social ecosystem, where it's been like I don't want to say like the stepchild, because they haven't grown to become an Instagram or a TikTok. It gets largely ignored by brand managers, but at the same time, it consistently shows in its user numbers that it is a place where younger audiences engage. So I would definitely look at places like Snapchat. And I would also, I didn't include too much of it because it's a topic all of its own, but I think gaming is definitely an area to investigate as well.
Awesome. So Snapchat is one of the, you would say, underused platform right now. Another question is that what do you look for in a creator brief to ensure that the content feels like their feed and not an ad? So it sort of resonates with the rest of their videos. It doesn't look like an ad suddenly popping up in the middle of their content.
That's a great one, actually. Do you know what? I've seen a phenomenon a few times now when I've worked with brands that are very big, is that sometimes creators actually will change their style because they're so excited to be working with the brand. So that's actually something to look out for in the process. I would say, have a brief that basically makes clear that you're looking to tap into their sort of style. Always come with examples. Always say, I want to work with you because I've seen this piece of content and this piece of content and this piece of content, and we love it for these reasons. And so they kind of understand and just and I guess have a dialogue. Don't just have a brief, send it out and expect to get the content back. Get their concept and workshop that with them as well.
Awesome. Let's just take one last question and then we can wrap this session up. Uh, what content format most reliably moves Gen Z from an interested phase to the phase where they will, try the product, and also why?
Um, I'm gonna answer this question, and then I'm gonna immediately answer one other, just because it caught my eye in the chat, and I think it's really important to say because I wanted to say it. Moving people from that kind of like awareness into the conversion piece, it is about, for me, it's about frequency, and that's why I say about constructing a campaign that involves those kind of big, heavy cultural hitters, and then smaller creators that kind of are a bit more relatable. I actually talk about it in terms of, and this kind of dovetails into what I was going to say. Someone asked, does it always have to be humor, or what if the brand doesn't align to humor?
Yeah.
The same principle applies in different industries, and the better way to think about it maybe is aspirational versus relatable. So a good example is, I've worked with a sportswear brand before, and I would say that 30% of their creators should be really highly aspirational, like maybe borderline athletes or kind of semi-pro. And then what you want to do is distill that down to people that are a bit more relatable. So if you're talking about running, for instance, you've got an ultra marathon runner as your aspirational, they're in your 30%. And then you've got someone just going and doing their first 5K, 10K as part of the 70%. And those are your relatable people. So it's this idea of kind of reaching in that 30% and then bring it down to ground level. And that answers the first question about how you move people, I think, from the interested to the conversion phase.
Awesome. I think this is, with that we will wrap up this session. Grant, thank you so much, Grant, for being here. It was an absolute pleasure having you with us, and obviously thank you for the amazing presentation as well. I think a lot of people in the comment section related with what you talked about, especially with the trends on Instagram and TikTok. So that was amazing. Thank you so much, Grant. It was lovely to have you. As for
Thanks.
the rest of you folks, this was the last session for the Prepathon 2025. But don't go anywhere, because up next we are going to be announcing the winners of this year's giveaways. So if you have participated in any of the quizzes or any of the activities, and if you think that you are topping the leaderboard, make sure to stick around, because winner announcement is next. Stay tuned.